It's like these expanding horizons where hybrid is a bridge into the fully electric opportunities of the future. And you better believe that those operators who are flying the 100-mile hybrid electrics today are probably going to rely on the trusted brands that they already know in electrification when they go and switch to fully electric. And that's the position that Ampaire is taking, which is start with electrification, build trust, and then whenever battery technology and infrastructure makes sense, we can transition over to fully electric for those customers too.
Welcome to Founder Mode.
This is the show where we talk about building things that are changing the future, and in this case, technologies that even change what's possible.
And today, future of flight, sustainability, and we're in a pretty cool space.
We're here doing something live. We don't usually record these live. I won't count how many times we've done it, but it's pretty good. And yeah, there's a plane behind us, so we'll talk about that in a second. When we're moving airplanes around, it's kind of important to get things right. So we've had at least one other episode about hardware. It's trickier, right, Kevin? We're hoping that what we learned from the conversation with other Kevin is that when driven by purpose, hardware innovation can move fast too.
Yeah, I mean, they always say like hardware is hard, and then I think doing aviation's already hard, and a lot of aviation companies just trying to go operate planes is hard, and now trying to rebuild or build your own plane, or in this case, retrofit planes is pretty tough. And I think it's going to be interesting to sort of dig in and see what they've done, and you can hear the planes in the background here. Yeah. We're in an active airport, Long Beach. Crazy story, like over 20 years ago, I actually learned to fly here.
Right.
On a little runway.
A little Cessna, right?
Yeah, on a little Cessna, 172, 152, kind of bouncing between the two of them. And good stories coming back in the day. Good to be back.
Yeah.
But also cool to be here with a much bigger plane than I learned to fly in. And I think the craziest thing about, what I rumored to have learned here is that, what they're actually doing, right? And how they're actually going to change aviation, not with the way where it's like, hey, we're just going to go fire up and start one of these, but actually, upgrade the engine or upgrade the sort of airplane without having to start over.
Yeah, I think what's cool about this, and when I told you that other Kevin had reached out and wanted to be on the show, is like, you're a pilot, you geek out on this stuff. Yeah. Here we are sitting in an airplane hangar with a plane behind us, about to talk to another plane nerd. Like, this is... come on, Kevin, this is about as good as it gets for you.
It is, but it also reminds me of why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Because when I was in high school, I was like, I want to be a mechanical engineer. I want to go build things. I get to college and I kind of like started talking to some people and figured out I'm like mechanical engineering, which I think Kevin's also mechanical engineer, went to school in LA. I figured out that like if I was going to go work in aerospace, I was going to build like one airplane in my career. Like, you go to Boeing or you go to one of these traditional manufacturers, you may work on one or two projects over a 30 or 40 year career. If you go and work in, sort of automotive, you maybe work on 3 to 4 projects over a 30 or 40 year career. So I ended up doing software where you work on
lots of projects.
3 to 4 projects a day, and and then with AI tools you could be working in 3 or 4 projects at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I think it is kind of cool to see people that are still working on some of these really tricky, hard problems.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, dedicating decades of time to go do it. It's like you spend your decades sort of learning, and then you're like, oh, now I'm ready for a startup. And then that startup is now, they're almost 10 years into this journey.
Yeah.
So it'll be kind of cool to dig into what they've accomplished so far, but more importantly, like, where are they in terms of like bringing this thing to the next step? Yeah.
So Kevin, who we're going to interview in just a moment, is co-founder and CEO of Ampaire. They're building this hard thing in hardware and in aviation, and his background's really interesting. He's worked in these massive aerospace companies and decided to strike out and do the startup thing. And I'm just excited to have the chat with him. Should we bring him on?
Let's do it. Kevin, welcome to Founder Mode for Electrifying Flight, and now really working on kind of the sustainable future. Thanks for being here.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're in your hangar, which is also your office and where all the magic happens, literally right before
Probably the most interesting site that we've been on in terms of like getting the work done and truly founder mode.
Yeah, it's mega founder mode in here. And literally last week we were in a space with a bunch of like tech companies, building software. And here we are in a hangar, and you guys are building airplanes.
Yeah.
So just thanks for inviting us, letting us crash into your space. We just basically told your team, like, don't go take an hour, like, don't do any work. Like, thank you for letting us do that.
Drop it in to see where the magic really happens.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah. So maybe give us like a little bit from the top, right? Like you started out, I believe, in aerospace systems, really big companies, and now you decided, okay, I'm going to go do a startup, and I'm going to try to kind of disrupt a pretty antiquated industry. First, why, and then like give us a little bit of the origin story.
Totally. So I'm a big nerd at heart, right? Grew up staring
Welcome
at
to the nerd show.
Yeah, I know, right? Staring at the stars, falling in love with space and aerospace and kind of all things that flew. And that led me to get a really technical degree over at Caltech, where I did mechanical engineering, robotics research at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So space robots is a pretty cool place to start. And then Northrop Grumman stealth technology, and then grew as a program manager on the aviation and space side of the house. And then it was about a decade ago that I was looking at kind of the existence within these big companies and realized I'd probably be able to have a bigger impact on the world if I jumped both feet in and actually started something. And that was the origin point for Ampaire, which was this kind of realization of where a future that we believed in deeply, right? About electrification touching aviation, and this question about how does that actually happen, and the conviction that my co-founders and I and the ultimate team that we would be able to build would solve those big questions together.
Yeah. So I think that's a pretty good segue into like, Northrop Grumman stealth team sounds very cool. And we're talking about $1 billion defense business. Like, one, are you crazy? And if not, like, tell us like why this problem that you decided to solve, and why go start from scratch? I mean, there's other companies trying to solve it. Like, what was that idea that led you to here?
Yeah, so I mean, like, and probably any founder's just a little bit crazy, just the right healthy amount.
Yeah.
You have to have deep conviction around something that you believe is going to transform the world, right? Like, there's no small idea here. It's really about a massive change. And yet we're able to find analogies in mobility around the world. Like, we had spent 20 years watching electric vehicles emerge on the ground and seeing how that happened over time, and are able to leverage that history, the technology, even some of the market dynamics as we've looked at aviation. So like the foundational truth that we started Ampaire on is that electrification was gonna change everything in aviation, just like the jet age did half a century ago, just like the dawn of powered flight and the Wright brothers a century ago. And so every 50 to 100 years, you get one of these opportunities in this space. And it was it became obvious that this was going to be really impactful. And so building off of that, you then say, okay, if I know the foundational mega trend that we're going to build on, like, what do you actually do about it, right? And that's been, over the last 9.5 years, the big question that, we ask every day, setting strategy, like, what are you really going to do in order to make a difference based on that truth that you fundamentally believe
And has
in?
that changed? I mean, like you said, it's almost been a decade now since you guys started. Like, is the approach and how you're going to go to market and sort of how you're going to sort of like solve this problem changed over those 10 years?
Totally. I mean, you learn so much over time.
No one says, no, nothing's changed.
Yeah, it's been a decade of just the same thing, turning the crank.
So to give some perspective, right? Like, where we were when we founded the company. Was around designing a brand new airplane that was vertical takeoff and landing, supersonic, fully electric.
Okay.
Yeah.
Totally.
Sounds dope.
I know. I would want to fly in that, right? And so, like, I think there's a job to be done at the very beginning of a company, which is about setting a North Star. Being audacious, identifying the big, bold future you want to build. And then the process is about, okay, let's peel the layers of the onion. Let's look at what matters and when, and what resource constraints or environmental constraints will dictate alterations to that strategy. And so while I believe that maybe someday the world will see those vertical lift, supersonic, fully electric jets, I just don't think that's step number one. right? So we have been living that, like, what is step number one now, and really rapidly listening to our customers in those first months and years. Listen to what the world really valued with the new technology. Like, why does anybody care? And then what's the pathway to actually get broad scale adoption? Because in aviation, they're kind of like two classes of companies. They're the classes that dominate their vertical and have like somewhere between 50 and 95% market share. And then there are all the others who like, you know, hash it out for a fraction of a percent. And so like the goal has to be the market dominant company. And in order to get there, you got to run a strategy that's pretty broad. And that's actually what we've positioned Ampaire to do, which is the broadest strategy in this electrification space. Is about going fast into a lot of different planes, which means rather than building a new plane, you're retrofitting the existing fleet. And then bringing technology where you fully mitigated all of these other factors like battery energy density, charging infrastructure availability, safety concerns around the technology, and you know, flight safety is absolutely critical, right? And so packaging all those pieces together, we have landed at what is like this most scalable, most exciting pathway to being the dominant company in the future of aviation propulsion.
Nice. Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because you checked all the boxes. Oh, vertical takeoff and landing, supersonic, fully electric. Like, yes, that sounds amazing. And there are companies that are doing one of those things. You know, you've got, is it Boom?
Boom Supersonic.
Supersonic. You've got a bunch of electric vehicle takeoff and landing companies. I'm not even going to list them all. Archer is the one that comes to mind. And then, you know, electrification is interesting in a bunch of different ways. There's another company in the space, Joby or something, right, that's trying.
Fully electric?
And behind us is a real aircraft that you guys are working on that flies, that is hybrid electric.
That's right. It's the world's largest hybrid electric plane, like sitting right here, 10 feet from us.
And it's like the wing is over our heads right now. You guys can't see it, but like this is like, it's real. It's a real thing. It's actually
real.
flying. And I think what's cool is that you're taking what I remember very vividly as the Toyota Prius strategy, which is like, here's a car that drives on the road today, and it is a hybrid electric. And so like apply that to aviation. So it makes sense to me, but I'm probably oversimplifying or saying it wrong. But if you had to say like the decision that got you there, you know, what was it over that 10 years where you arrived at, oh, we're going to go hybrid electric and not fully electric or not hydrogen or one of these other technologies?
Yeah, so this was actually a very specific moment in the company. This happened late 2020. We had just deployed one of our airplanes out to Hawaii, and we were island hopping on the island of Maui, flying between the Kahului airport and Hana.
Tough life, man.
I know, right? The majestic place to fly. Like the north side of that island is just beautiful. And if you've ever been to Maui, you might have driven the road to Hana, a 2-hour drive or a like 20-minute flight. And so we were flying that. It's an essential air service route. The U.S. government subsidizes it, serves community needs that are truly essential. And so we're flying that. Now, we had spent 18 months prepping for that set of flights, building the world's first hybrid electric plane in order to then deploying it in Hawaii and getting all the regulatory approvals. Like, that was hard. What was even harder was getting a single small electric vehicle charger approved to plug in on the airport side of the infrastructure at the main airport. And we had everybody up through the governor's office like waving the banners for success on this program. And yet infrastructure takes time and it's difficult. And even when everybody's fully supportive, sometimes it's just challenging to roll out. And I remember there was an infrastructure investor who was talking to me at the time, and he said, "Kevin, I only need to know 2 things. Like, how much power do you need, and when do you need it?" And you're like, well, those are pretty basic questions. But in fully electric aviation, that's actually really hard. Like, what is the ramp rate? How can you have confidence? And to invest in the infrastructure, you have to have confidence in the scale of the market and the timing. And that's very difficult. So coming out of that project in Hawaii, what we learned was that we had to be infrastructure independent, that our planes have plugs, like you're able to plug them in on the ground, but you need to be able to operate this thing like a Toyota Prius in the early 2000s, where you could drive to your grandma's house and not worry about whether she had a plug in her garage.
Yep. Use the existing infrastructure to keep running. And
Exactly. And so that's the type of hybrid that we've built. Self-charges during cruise, lands anywhere a normal plane would go, flies actually double the range of a normal aircraft, meets all of the standard operating requirements that the operators have. And like, that's how you actually hit scalability, is have no apologies needed. It's just benefit.
What other early lessons have you learned from those tests, or did you pick up and be like, wow, that's another thing where we just kind of need to make a kind of a 180 or a 90 from what we had initially thought?
Yeah, so really learned this idea of like, how do you be agile? Right, all this idea of being an agile startup and iterating and like,
it's easy in software, right?
Yeah,
You just click rebuild.
Like, let's beta test an airplane. How do you do that, right? And so what you learn are these tips and these tricks. Like for every airplane that we fly, we've built what we call an Iron Bird, which is like the beta test vehicle. You integrate it all on the ground. You never expect to fly. You can punch holes. You don't have to worry about regulatory requirements.
Yep.
And then you can learn really rapidly, make mistakes, fail fast, fail forward, learn as a team, and then move on these aggressive timelines to get the system built right. And then you integrate it into the flyable plane, retrofitting it in, and that helps us move quickly. Another thing we've learned is like, what is true redundancy when it comes to like safety systems. And our very first airplanes we actually had, they're so cool, decoupled propulsion systems. So you've got a hybrid airplane
Switch to one or the other.
where one is fully electric, the other is fully combustion.
Yeah.
And so no matter what would have ever happened on our electric propulsion, which was the new and novel and scary stuff, we would always be able to fly home on the combustion engine. And so like, while we've had a 100% safety record, which is great,
Congrats.
like having that belt and suspenders, that redundant
Feels
approach
nice.
is nice. And so we've learned actually in the hybrid plane that's behind us, though it's only a single engine plane, one propeller, if you actually look under the hood, you see that same type of architecture where you could fall back on a fully combustion engine safely and fly home.
Awesome.
Which is phenomenal when you're thinking about like getting people comfortable, getting the regulators to approve it, and ultimately delivering on this, this vision that we've got for this, the broad world of aviation.
Yeah, we're at Long Beach Airport right now, which is a real airport. Lots of commercial flights go through here. This is like legit. You talk about regulators and regulation. Talk about those early days when it relates, and even to now, and trying to get things through. I imagine it's not always easy to work with the FAA. It's not always easy to work with partners and maybe your early customers and even the pilots. Like when you say there's a redundancy of like electric and combustion on the plane, I'm like, oh, that sounds safer, because like, oh, the ICE engine goes down and there's actually the electric as a backup.
That's right.
That's kind of cool. So on the flip side, anything new in aviation takes longer than like, oh, this car company wants to do something different. So talk about the relationship with those partners and the regulators and the pilots and everybody.
At the end of the day, everybody's just people, right?
Yep.
And people are motivated by aspiration and fear. And when you really work closely with the human beings within these systems, you can start to understand and then work really productively within them. So let's take the FAA, for example, right? Great long-term partners of Ampaire. We've been working with them closely.
I wasn't bad. Though, if you're listening, FAA, I am not bad-mouthing you. You guys are great.
Your next flight's going to be late.
Continue to be huge supporters of Ampaire. They're amazing. Look, this place is buttoned up.
They are wonderful, and they've
awesome.
come through and witnessed testing and stuff, and so really good partners, because like they've got a hard job. Right. Their job is to ensure that we have the safest aviation system in the world. And also that we don't fall behind on technology, that we don't fall behind on sustainability, that we don't lose essential industries to international competition. And so they're in this tension between the highly motivated to bring on the new technologies and yet highly motivated to ensure safety. And so these things are very dissonant. So this is actually one of the areas we've been able to partner really well with them. That is, we've talked about, this engine is more redundant, more safe than even a traditional combustion-only engine. Now imagine if your job was to keep the industry safe and also bring in brand new technologies.
They love you.
They're like, wait. I get to win on electrification and win on safety?
Yeah.
And wait, I get a sustainability, like
Nice.
50% fuel reduction as well?
Yeah.
Like that is about understanding the motivating factors and working collaboratively with them rather than like pushing against. Because there are people out there who are, very grumpy about regulatory bodies and start asking for waivers or even like, maybe they're dropping scooters on the street without even asking, right? Like there's a strategy that
Don't
people...
worry, we haven't interviewed any scooter people yet.
fair
You're
enough.
fine.
Well, you got to watch out.
Get them.
There are strategies that work in some industries, and in aviation, many of those strategies are less effective. And the one that works great in aviation, especially because it's so safety critical, is just this really thoughtful partnership. And so I'm grateful and feel very fortunate for the relationship we're able to build.
So switching gears a little bit to like, you have been at it for a while. I mean, 10 years, like it takes money. I mean, you guys this is not like a small office, right? There's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of tools here. Like what advice or what have you learned about, sort of being in this kind of capital intensive thing as a startup, right? It's one thing to come from a big company that's had decades of experience, lots of big government contracts, lots of investment to come to a startup where you're like, now, like, these days you see somebody vibe coding an app and it's like in 10 minutes and $10 or $20 a month ChatGPT subscription, they've got built an app. That's not happening here, right? I mean, you guys got that. Maybe there's wrenches over here that cost more than that, right? And like, you've got a big box hangar full of them.
Yeah.
What have you sort of learned about how to capitalize a company like this, but also how to work with investment partners that see that sort of, clearly multi-year, but multi-decade sort of adventure that you got to be on, right? If it's going to take you 10 years to get there, and then you kind of start to launch the thing, what have you seen, or what advice would you give to people that are thinking about this?
Sure. So you just decompose it into the various factors, right? Very systems engineer of me, but to think about, okay, you've got uses of funds, you've got sources of funds, you've got strategies that have different requirements and levels. So first and foremost, it was about picking like, what is a capital efficient strategy that matters? Right? You can go spend a few $1 billion and design a brand new aircraft, or you can spend tens of millions of dollars and build brand new engines for planes that already exist. It's orders of magnitude, many orders of magnitude difference in cost, just by the strategy we've picked. There's some data that we've looked at that we are 50 times more capital efficient, flight hours per dollar spent, than many of our peers who are in the industry pursuing some of these other strategies. And then, so there you're finding strategies that are capital efficient, even when the generic assumption is that it's capital heavy, right? So that's number one. The second is, where do you go get the money? So number one, you find people who are willing to invest in the entrepreneur, right? Because that's what pre-seed money really is. Is like people who are just like, it's a tenacious group of folks, they'll figure it out. Right? That's like my best friend's dad. Like, Kevin, I'll invest in your first company. It's those kinds of
family
folks,
and friends,
right?
Yeah.
And then you go into the people who are looking to drive impact on the world, but are willing to write off the first investment down to zero at taking that risk. But fundamentally, especially in areas like this, it's not traditional VC, where you need deep conviction in order to invest in a company like this. And so you end up building relationships over a long period of time, educating folks and bringing them on board. And then you look for validating factors that de-risk the investment for them. So, for example, bringing on a partnership with an airline or doing a pilot project and showing the technology or regulation is more manageable. And then finally, it's about where are you getting the capital from? And so we've brought in about $55 million into Ampaire so far, 30 invested, 25 in government contracts that are non-dilutive. Right? So if you can ride that 50-50
and those look
split,
like grants or something.
They look like grants, So this is Department of Energy, NASA, Air Force, and other DoD groups.
That flight to Hana was a good flight.
It was,
It was important.
Yeah, I mean, this is
great.
This is that organization, Elemental Impact, that funded that pilot program was funded by the Office of Naval Research.
Nice.
So like the federal government, the state government, and other groups that are sometimes philanthropic, funding in-kind, non-dilutive progress really helps offset some of the expensive programs. And if you actually look at the history of aviation, or generally of aerospace, heavily partnering with government funding to offset a significant portion of the development costs traditionally, and that's the strategy that we've taken as well.
Yeah, I didn't even consider the kind of nationalism piece of it, which is like, no, our aviation industry, fully vertically integrated, has to be on the cutting edge, and we need to kind of beat the rest of the world, and that's important, and the government is investing in that as well.
Definitely.
That hadn't crossed my mind until you said it. It makes total sense. And so, the other thing about this that I keep wondering about is you have a strategy, and we're in this kind of smaller regional airport right now. It's still a commercial airport, but tell us a little bit more about why regional travel, why cargo routes, smaller airports, smaller airplanes first. Like, again, I think I know where this is going, but I'd love to hear like how you got there and why those decisions.
Sure. So there are different categories of airplanes and different categories of airlines. And these different categories are really based on the amount of risk involved. So a smaller plane like this that holds up to about 14 people is in a different regulatory category than your 737 is, right? So that's one practical thing. We can move faster in this regulatory category. The second one is, the big airplanes are at much higher power levels. You're in tens of megawatts plus, whereas this is about half a megawatt at the propulsion level. And so still a ton of power, like more than most EVs.
Yeah, my Tesla doesn't have half a megawatt.
And so so it's pretty powerful, right? But it's still well within the realm of the technology that exists today.
Right.
I don't need magic batteries. I don't need superconducting like cables. I don't need a superconducting motor. I can work within the realm of physics and industry that really exists. And so it means that it's very accessible from the technology standpoint. So it's the great launching part. The second is like this segment of the industry is in dire need of innovation. Like you look at the thermal efficiency of the legacy engines and it's down around 20%. And so like they're just burning fuel, literally just burning fuel, which is the greatest cost for many of these airlines. And so that—
Not to mention the climate impact.
Not to mention the climate impact. And so then you think about these airlines that need a solution, that don't have good technology for it yet, but have a real need for something that is improved. And technology that fits, regulation that fits. So all the pieces come together where this is a great launching point. And it's also, there are tens of thousands of planes out there in this category, so you can get that broad scale adoption.
We talked about like sort of the Prius as like kind of the early generation of kind of full electric. Like they went to hybrid, then we got to full electric. Do you see kind of aviation taking that same path where it's like this hybrid sort of approach is first and eventually you get to full electric, or you think eventually we get there, or is there something different where hybrid's actually going to run a lot longer in aviation?
Yeah, so I mean, even now, like I just went out and bought a car, and granted I'm biased, it's a hybrid.
Yeah, there you
right?
go.
And so you ask why, and
Yeah.
it's like because my house built in the 50s doesn't have the electrical infrastructure to charge yet, and I'm not ready to upgrade that, right? Or because we run road trips that probably won't have charging infrastructure available, right? So even today in modern day California, Los Angeles, like the heart of mobility, you end up with use cases that still make sense on the ground for hybrids. Similarly in aviation, 20, 30, 40 years in the future, I really believe that there will be applications where in like sub-Saharan Africa, and we know operators out there, there's probably not going to be an electric vehicle charger on those dirt strips for a while.
Fans are flying out there, right?
Exactly, right? And so you look at the use cases and you realize that at the global scale, you need flexibility for operations. And that flexibility would be held back pretty dramatically if you required infrastructure. So for that element alone, even forgetting battery technology improvements, it's likely that hybrids will play a really meaningful role for improved access to the new technology. On top of that, I think that there's an element of just the utility of a hybrid vehicle, the range of a hybrid vehicle is always going to be longer than the fully electric equivalent. And so what you'll see is these expanding horizons where range will improve over time as batteries get better. And that range expansion will happen for both the electric bubble getting bigger and bigger, and then the surrounding hybrid electric bubble getting bigger and bigger. So while early routes, the short, call it 100-mile route that's flying on hybrids today, might transition to fully electric in a decade or less, there will be, all that much more, maybe 10 times more market opportunity that recently opened up for the hybrids. So when I think about hybrid electric, right, I think about expanding horizons of aircraft performance, where hybrids will always functionally be able to fly a bit farther than the fully electric alternative. And this is a good thing because for every incremental improvement in batteries, while electric might be able to fly more routes, hybrids will also have an increasing market opportunity, right? And so it's like these expanding horizons where hybrid is a bridge into the fully electric opportunities of the future. And you better believe that those operators who are flying the 100-mile hybrid electrics today are probably going to rely on the trusted brands that they already know in electrification when they go and switch to fully electric. And that's the position that Ampaire is taking, which is start with electrification, build trust, and then whenever battery technology and infrastructure makes sense, we can transition over to fully electric for those customers too, without ever having to bet on the timelines.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. What's refreshing about this conversation to me is basically every episode of Founder Mode, Kevin and I hear the two letters AI the whole conversation. You haven't said it once, which is wonderful because it's just like a nice, refreshing thing. But I'm going to do the thing we do with all the AI people, which is like, okay, fast forward to 2030, right? Or maybe it's 2040, 2050. Like, what does this look like? When am I getting on the 737 or the future version of that, which is a jet with jet engines, and it's either hybrid or it's fully electric, and like, paint the picture of aviation, both commercial for passengers like dummies like me who don't understand any of this stuff. He's a pilot, so he gets a lot more of what you're saying than I do. Paint the picture for folks that are listening who are neophytes when it comes to this stuff, and tell us where it's all going.
Sure. So I'll tell you where it's going, and I'll talk about how to get there, right?
Yeah, please.
So where it's going is vertical takeoff and landing, supersonic, fully electric jets, right? Someday in the future.
The vision you guys have is
right?
real.
Like these things will come down the pipeline, and we just don't know when. But in order to get there, what you need to do is you need to expand the trusted technology, both up in maturity on power levels, so that you can get to the tens of megawatt class propulsion that you need in the big planes. And you'd also need a transformative shift in energy storage technologies. So people are working on really advanced batteries, lithium ion and other types of batteries that could hold much more electricity per unit weight than modern day batteries. You're definitely going to need those to come down. You're going to need motors that are way bigger and more efficient and probably even superconducting to get up to those power levels. And then you're going to need regulatory bodies that get comfortable with the technology over time and understand those risks and how to mitigate them in the big planes. Now, in order to get there, where we begin is we actually take the same engines that are down here in the small planes and we adapt them to be what are called auxiliary power units, onboard power, APUs, for regional jets and narrow body jets. So think like your 737, A320, Embraer regional jets. These are our targets for this onboard power. And it's one, to have a great product. There are tens of thousands of those planes that could be retrofit and many being built every year. But additionally, it's about building those relationships with the airlines and their maintenance crews, building familiarity with the electrification stuff, making those planes more electric, not fully electric, but more electric over time. Maybe you're replacing some of the hydraulic or pneumatic stuff with electric actuators. Maybe you're increasing seat power for that, AI-powered experience you're looking for. Maybe
you didn't have to do it, but it's good.
I like it.
But like you're looking at these different applications that use electricity. And are cleaner for the environment, lower cost to operate, more reliable, more maintainable. And so that's how you slowly increase the temperature of the water and bring the new technology to where the market really needs it and kind of impedance match the two.
Awesome. Kevin, this has been electrifying. Where can people follow your work?
Yeah, so you can always find us at ampaire.com or Ampaire Inc. on any of the socials. Nice. If you're ever in the Los Angeles area, hit us up. We're friendly, and sometimes we even take people up for flights. So.
Let's do it.
Hey,
wow,
I want to do that right after this. But
But
where can folks connect with you online, Kevin?
Yeah, best to connect with me is on LinkedIn. So if you reach out, put a personalized note in there, and I'm a good person too.
Awesome. Yeah. Very cool. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for being here, Kevin. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for coming down.
Well, that was inspiring and super grounded.
Yeah, I really loved the conversation with Kevin, who I respectfully call other Kevin because it gets confusing for me. But or maybe he's the Kevin, you're other Kevin. That's fine. So Kevin, we do this every episode. I want to know, as the aviation geek that you are, what were the big 5 things that you took away from the conversation?
Yeah, so I think the first one was this notion of like being hybrid, because that's the only what the infrastructure is set up for today, right? Early days of electric cars, we saw the Prius dominate and these sort of hybrid electrics because there wasn't charging infrastructure. And I think with airplanes, it's not just charging infrastructure, it's also just the capacity, because the amount of batteries that you would need to take a plane like this in the sky is so big. And then this notion of like, again, retrofitting a plane, like these are existing airframes that they're retrofitting rather than starting from scratch, putting in new sort of, clean sheeting an airplane, which was their sort of original vision, which was interesting to see that, they landed on this, which is going to get them to market a lot faster.
Yeah.
I think the third thing was this idea of funding and, knowing that the government has to support sort of some of these big plans and to help aviation take it to the next level, seeing that mixed funding. So part non-dilutive equity, and part sort of venture, sort of friends and family, the traditional sort of thing that we know. And then the fourth being this idea of having to prove the safety, right? Like how do you ensure that this is safe or safer than the current sort of models to make sure that that gets through the regulation framework and obviously delivers something that people can ride around in and be safe. And then the final is this idea of like going to market initially with regionals. And then I think you asked an interesting thing, which was like, what happens like when this starts to work? Like, do the regionals go away? It's like, no, this thing now can just reach farther. And so that regional sort of expanding to like a super regional or sort of like concentric circle around what they can reach today.
If this was helpful for you, please share it with another founder that's building something hard, maybe in hardware or a heavily regulated space like aviation. Give us a like, a subscribe, and we just rely on your feedback. So tell us what you want to see more of.
That's all for today. Sometimes the best way to change the world is start with what already flies.